Okay, that's sorted. Right. So we can start and people can join us as we move along. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining today. My name is Parveen. I work at University of Sheffield in School of Allied Health Professions, Nursing and Midwifery, and Doncaster and Bassetlaw Teaching Hospitals as Professor of Nursing and Professor of Gender-Based Violence. These workshops, myself and Sarah, run as part of our DBTH role in an attempt to increase research capacity among nurses, midwives, and allied health professionals mainly, but anyone who wants to come and join us to talk about any of these issues. So we do these workshops every month on various different topics, and we do try and open it up to other places and institutions as well, just to encourage discussion and networking among people. And that's a little bit about myself. So I'll let Sarah introduce herself and then we can start.
Thanks, Parveen. I'm Sarah Gardner. I'm the clinical evidence specialist for Doncaster and Bassetlaw Teaching Hospitals. And my role within these webinars is to contribute where I have some knowledge and to support Parveen where I don't. I'm sticking and something else in chat. I do like chat. So this is our library webpage for DBTH for supporting research. So we're not precious. If you're not from our trust, you are still welcome to have a look at the webpage. We have a lot of jumping off points, useful things, and also, crucially, the sign-up links for our subsequent webinars in this series, and also videos of webinars that have taken place previously, the kind of ghosts of webinars past. So you can check out the links backwards and forwards for those and all of the other useful stuff that we have. It'll give you a flavour for how our library service supports research within the trust as well.
So thank you, everybody. So since we are about 11 people in this chat, there are different ways we could do it. I mean, I don't kind of like the, talking at you sort of stuff. So one approach could be that you've come to this session, so you must have some questions that you could ask. So we could do it a discussion type of approach if you all are comfortable with. But I also understand that it's usually difficult to come up with a question and knowing that should I ask this or not? So I'm happy to give a little bit of a preamble about, how to develop research question, and then we can have a discussion. Which one of these approaches would you prefer? Just clap or use emoji if you prefer the first one.
I'm happy for you to give us a little bit of chat first and then us to come in afterwards with any questions that pop into our mind.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I think the preamble is gaining some traction in chat as well, Parveen.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's usually quite hard kind of, to think of a question straight away. People, not as such hard, but I think people shy away from it basically. Okay, not a problem at all. Let me get my presentation up and then we could just take it on from there. There are 100,000 windows open on my computer, so let me choose the right one. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much. So today we are going to talk about developing a research question. And Sarah, would you be happy to please keep an eye on kind of who is letting people in? If that's
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll take the window off because it's distracting me and too many toolbars and they don't seem to be going any. Okay, that's better. All right. So we are going to talk about developing a research question. And this is one of the fundamental or important topic that people struggle with. Right now, of course, I'm talking about developing a research question, but it is about, it's a very common thing. So it starts off with when we have to ask any particular question. So if we take it example of home life, so it's like, for instance, every evening we are struggle with thinking of what should we have for tea today. If you're anyone like me, that usually is quite a daunting question, and you have to think through this and come up with some kind of a conclusion. If you're a student doing undergraduate, master's, or any other courses, when it comes to doing your assignment, knowing which topic to do the work on or what to choose is usually quite a difficult task. And when it comes to people who want to do PhD or research studies, developing research questions become a very daunting task in itself. What we tend to think is that we don't necessarily always think about things that are near to us or very obvious to us, but we usually go for the stuff we want to have some focus on something unique, something different, something which we think is world changing or more important. And while doing so, we spend quite a lot of time and energy, and perhaps still are not happy about it. It's also this sometimes we come up with questions and we think, well, wow, this is an interesting study and no one has done that. And, it's my novel idea and I'm going to do it, only to go and find out that there are other people who are thinking about the same thing on this topic. It's a little bit like if you've started thinking about a topic and you never see any discussion going on Facebook or anywhere, and suddenly you start noticing the very same topic being discussed in various different places, and you just think, how did that happen? I don't have an answer. Probably people start thinking about those issues all of a sudden at the same time, or while you're thinking something, there's somebody else somewhere else is also thinking about it. So then you just think, well, okay, I should have done something different. So therefore, it becomes quite a daunting task. So there are 5 R rules which I suggest when it comes to developing a research question. And these include read. So once you have a hunch or something that you want to work on, it should be something related to your practice or something that you see daily, rather than coming up with something which we are not familiar with. Because when we choose something relevant to our subject or discipline that we are doing from and observing issues or problems in our daily life, we seem to have more information and awareness about those issues and can actually understand the complexities of it and major problems within that. So the rule of 5 suggests that, once you have an idea, make sure you read about it as much as you can. What I suggest, if it is about research question and if it is about research study, try and look at some sort of a review article which is published recently. What it does is it does not only give you the background information about that particular topic, an overview of the topic, but then it also may give you kind of critique of what's already available and what's not available, and therefore may help you think through the gaps in the literature or help you refine your research question. The next R is it relevant to you? And as I said earlier, try and choose something that is relevant to you, to your role, and to your daily life. Why? You're able to comprehend this better, you're able to explore that better, you know the complexities and issues around it, and you're able to contribute better and it wouldn't become another work or chore for you. So you could integrate into your practice if much more easily than having something which is completely different. Reflection. So once you've done these 2 things, third is reflect, like looking at, is this a clear question? Is it making sense? Is it doable? Is it not doable? How can we make that work? What would we need to do this? And that reflection also helps then improving the research question or the question that we want to develop. Remember to remain focused on one area. What generally happens that thinking about research question or anything like that is not easy. It's quite daunting. And once we start thinking about it, then we think, oh, there are too many things done on this particular topic, or it's not as good as it should be. So we don't spend enough time on the topic and think through this and quickly move on to the other. Many people do that. And that's a mistake, because if you spend enough time on something, then you're able to look into the nitty-gritties of it and look deeper into it and have better understanding. Whereas if you kept on switching from one thing to the other, it's going to be quite difficult, and it doesn't, you will never have the in-depth thinking about one particular aspect. So that's something to think about. Remaining focused, another element of this particular aspect is that, the question needs to be focused and specific. And one example which I usually give is that, if you have seen the needle through which the thread goes, and, for suturing or for at home for hemming or on sewing machine, you will see there is a small little kind of hole through which the thread passes. Somebody has written 200,000 words essay or a thesis on that particular hole, because, to describe the various different aspects of it. And I'm sure you would find it really difficult that how can somebody write in, that much on that small little hole? What it tells us is that anything that we dwell in can be deep in itself. So therefore, remaining focused is really important, that, it doesn't have to cover everything in the world. It doesn't have to be, doing too many things. It has to be really focused, really small, and you'll be surprised how much work that really focused things it will generate either. And the last thing is reaching out, talking to other people, talking to colleagues, trying to see if your idea makes sense. Does it need changing? What do they think about it? And all of these things are, in a way, a cycle. And it helps you improve your research question that you develop, and till you're happy with it. Now, one of the things is why we ask questions. There are various reasons for doing it, because we ask questions because we would like to have some sort of direction and focus of the work. It helps us planning in terms of any work that we are doing, or any study that we are conducting, or anything else like that, because it just helps us think through as to what we are doing next. It helps us in searching literature. If you have a question in your mind, then you have a topic in your mind, and then you can go and search something on that particular topic to try and see what already exists. If you don't have a question in your mind, you can't do that. It helps then identify appropriate method, because then it would determine the type of methodology that you're going to use for research, or the type of data collection, data analysis, or approach that you're going to use. Where are you going to get the participants from? Which setting you're going to use? If you don't have questions, you can't come up with any of the other aspects. So you have to have a question to be able to think of all those aspects later on. And it provides a framework of the work that you're trying to conduct. You might think, where do research questions come from? I think some of this we've already discussed. They come from theory, so which is, for example, an organized body of concepts, generalization, and principles that can be subjected to investigation. So for any particular established theories, can help people develop questions to see, does that apply here or not? You could think of any particular example. So for example, we know that if we take the example of health, within the health sector, or nursing, or nurses, midwifery, allied health professions, if we say the range of motion exercises, or we know that how many bones we have and how do they interact. So, there is established knowledge, and you will try and find something around that, within that, to explore the principles, to see if that's generalizable or not. That's what you're going to do. So once I was doing a research conference, somebody shared their research questions, and they wanted to look at the heart of individuals. So what usually happens, that any treatment for heart conditions apparently depends on the height and weight of a person, and your size of your heart depends on because your size of your heart depends on the height of and the weight that you have. And a lot of research that's been done in that particular arena comes from Caucasian population, and therefore it is based on the weight and height of the heart of that particular population, and that is being used throughout the world. Now, many populations in the world do not necessarily have the same height and weight. So therefore, the height and weight of their heart would also be different. So it could have an impact on how much medicine we give them or what sort of treatment we are giving to people. So so that person was trying to look into that particular aspect in a South Asian population to try and see if that applies there and what should we learn from there. So those sorts of examples provides you with the conceptually rich topics because you already know the nitty-gritties around it. There's a lot of discussion going on around different concepts around that. They provides confirmation for some aspects of theory or not confirmation of other aspects of theory. So they help build knowledge in that sense. The other thing is personal experiences and observations. We develop questions from the things that we observe around us and that we think are working or not working or developing further. So things that we in general practice around us that we think are probably, they're not working correctly and therefore that needs changing, or the observation that we make around it. And replication. So something is done in one particular setting and we want to test in another setting. So again, the example of height and weight of heart is good here because that helps then to explore if the findings coming from a study conducted in one particular setting is relevant in other setting or not. COVID-19 related studies are a good example in that case. People are still kind of exploring because the treatment efficacy and how COVID affected at various different populations was slightly different. So people are still trying to see, what's affecting one population that's not affecting the other one. So they may use the same methods and same aspects and try and do it in other places. And of course, identified gaps in the literature, things that we already know needs to be explored or developed is something that gives you a topic or question idea. Then there are issues around researchable topics. Some topics are researchables and others are not. Could you give me any idea of what could be a researchable, what could be a non-researchable topic? Anyone? No? Okay,
No, I have no clue.
go on.
I don't know, because to me, everything can be researched, everything can be questioned. So thinking of something that doesn't compute.
Okay, let's have a look. So researchable topics are those which can be investigated through the collection and analysis of data for something for which we can identify what data we are collecting, we can collect some data and we can analyze some data and we can come up with some information. These are those topics which can be conducted ethically. You're not going to, if you wanted to check the efficacy of a vaccine, you're not going to kind of give injections to people for that particular condition to try. That has happened in the past, and that's how ethical concepts have been developed, but it's not ethical. So things that can be done ethically, if we wanted to look at, for example, the pain related to amputation, we're not going to go around and ampute people's limbs to try and see how much pain they're going to have or what treatment would work there, but it has to be done in some ethical and appropriate way. It has got some theoretical or practical significance. It's going to help our understanding in some way. It's useful. So those are researchable topics. And it contributes to the educational or knowledge related aspects and can be adequately researched given the expertise, resources, and time constraints of the researcher. So whatever your field of practice is, whatever you're doing, whatever expertise you have, resources you have, you should be able to contain it within that time frame to be able to conduct that, explore that topic. So those are all researchable topics. So in a way that then also helps you understand how far can you go with a research topic or with some sort of an issue, because you don't want to make it too big to be able to conduct properly or contain properly, and you don't want it to be too simple to not to have any impact. So these points do help you with that. Having said that, there are some non-researchable topics as well. Now, it can be a point of debate, but things like philosophical or ethical issues where there is no clear-cut answer. So you're never going to get any one aspect or the true answer, if that makes sense. So if, for instance, if you're a quantitative person and you wanted to kind of explore something in terms of yes and no, or for instance, does God exist or not, you're always going to have the different interpretation from various different perspectives. And ethical issues. There will always be more than one way of describing the situation and looking at the situation. So is that then really kind of worth coming up with or exploring that? Because these cannot be resolved through collection and analysis of data. Things which are should questions. So for example, anything which is a matter of opinion, is that a researchable topic? You might argue that these are researchable topics, but would you come back with any particular concrete answers which are useful? Probably not. So those are some of the things which are non-researchable. There are some common problems that people encounter when thinking about research questions. And these include the first one, which we already talked about, deciding which area or topic to look for. What should we make for tea tonight? Okay, which topic shall I look for? I'm interested in too many things in my service or in my practice. So which one it is that I am going to talk about is a very common problem. Inability to think of a topic, not being able to think what topic shall I focus on, or just being blocked and not able to identify any particular issues that you could think of. Knowing which specific area or subtopic to focus on. So you may have a broader interest, but don't know how to focus or specify a particular example. We come across that quite a lot. And a very, very common one is inability to clearly articulate a question. So they may come up with a topic, they may come up with some subtopics and know what area to do it, but what they don't know how to articulate the research question in a way which is understandable to people. Now, what happens that people usually have a lot of knowledge when they are thinking about questions or aspects. If you, for example, have a question in your mind, you will have spent a lot of time thinking through this, so therefore would have a lot of information at the back of your mind, which makes it very, very clear to you. But then they waffle when somebody else asks them about their research question. They're not able to articulate a question in one sentence or two sentences. So therefore it needs practicing, and practicing is not easy. So when people are practicing, sometimes they get fed up and they just leave it there and move on to the next issue. So that's where persistence is needed, where you practice and write the question that you want to ask so that it's understandable to you and it's communicatable and understandable to other people. Going too quickly is another issue which I said that, switching from one thing to the other, and that's not right. Let's do something else. No, this is not attractive enough. Let's do something else. And going through quickly from one thing to the other does not allow you enough time to think about the issues related to one aspect, and therefore you lose a lot of time and you cannot come up with a proper question. Common mistakes that people make, wanting to change the world. It's a very common issue, especially with PhD students, master students, that they come up with a very broad questions, a very broad idea. And if you ask them or to focus, sometimes many of them do find it quite offensive, because they just want to change the world and change everything without realizing the amount of data that is going to generate would be quite too much, and they will not be able to focus that. So my response usually to that is that please do change the world, but do it slowly and do it step by step. So once you get on the step one, that's step one of changing the world, and do it kind of, as you go through it. Why it is a mistake when you want to change the world? You're unlikely to. It doesn't happen. That's why we would see the problems or issues that people have been struggling with 20 years ago. Today you would find that same issues are still there, whereas if you did small little changes to small little practices, that does change. It is also a mistake because, as I said, your project will be too ambitious and you'll be unable to contain it. Setting out to prove something, there is something inherently wrong with this issue, because it's philosophically flawed. Because when you want to prove that I'm going to prove I am right, or this question is right, or this population has got this problem, the philosophy, the question is philosophically flawed, and therefore you will not be able to prove anything. And research doesn't prove anything anyway. If anything, it identifies more questions and more areas of understanding that we need to explore. So trying to prove something, especially in a unidirectional way, is flawed. Whereas if we want to look at the effectiveness of something or usefulness of something, which means that we are happy to look at the failures as well as successes, that is a much more better way of doing it, and you will have an understanding of both aspects. Whereas if you try to kind of only look at the unidirectional issues, it's going to be a problem. Deciding on your methods first doesn't help, because you need to have a clear question in your mind. So deciding on your methods first is like, I give this example that, you know, it's you need to be able to understand and decide where you are going before you sit in your car and go in that direction. If you don't know where you're going, and if you haven't decided where you're going, you can't just sit in your car and drive away, because then there's no focus. You don't know what is it that you're going to do. So therefore, it is important that you have a question first before you decide which methods you are going to use and how you're going to answer that question. Questions is slightly different depending on if you're using a quantitative approach. That means that you're going to deal with numbers, or you're going to deal with the qualitative aspect. So for qualitative studies, we usually talk about not research questions, but purpose statements. And the purpose statement is similar to research question. What it does, it articulates what is it that you would like to do and what is the broader aim of the study. So it usually starts off with the topic of this study will be, or is this, that, the other. And this study needs to be conducted because, and you provide your rationale around it and explain why you need to do it. So for example, the purpose of this narrative phenomenological XYZ type of study is, or will be, to understand, describe, develop, discover, whatever your purpose is, phenomena of interest, and which participant, which site. So you could use this template to format any purpose statement for your qualitative studies if you like. And good qualitative purpose statements should be a single sentence. It should include the purpose of the study. It should explain the central phenomena that you're going to cover. It should use qualitative words, explore, understand, discover, which is one of the biggest issues that people still try and use quantitative phrases when doing qualitative studies. So for example, we would like to determine factors affecting this, which automatically gives you thinking about numbers and not necessarily qualitative aspects of things. And you should also be thinking and noting a number of participants, if any, in there, and the research site. And then that gives you a good purpose statement, which should describe everything about your study that you're conducting to your readers. And here, I just wanted to give you some examples of qualitative research. So to examine barriers and facilitators to physical activity and exercise among ethnically diverse older adults who have fallen. To understand strategic stakeholders, understand and respond to UK Safer Patient initiatives. So can you see how it gives you the participant population that they're covering, the site which you're doing to do, and what the topic which they're going to do, and what is it that they're looking for. To understand how clinical staff and medical wards identify, classify, narrativize, and orient to patient safety risks, and so on. And this also tells me that I need to update these statements because they seem to be quite old, but it still serve the purpose. Good qualitative research questions should also begin with W words, how or what. And you have to state what is it that you want to do, discover, generate, explore, identify, describe, ask what happened to help craft your question, ask what the meaning of this is to other people, and you know, what will they get by understanding the results that you have. Ask what happened over time to explore the process. So there are different type of questions depending on the focus of your study that you want to have. So essentially, it's a process, it's a cycle of thinking, reading, reflecting, discussing, reading it again, and developing a question. And then the cycle goes back again to ensure, to refine and improve it. Okay, So that's a little bit of a blur from me. I didn't want it to take a whole time just talking to my about the research questions. I'm happy to take any questions, and then Sarah is going to introduce you to few question development frameworks which can help you develop your research question better if you if you're still trying to do go through that process. Most of the question development frameworks are developed for developing review questions, at looking at research, available literature, and helping to understand what we already know about something and trying and doing in that way. But they can also develop a focused research question, and I hope you will find useful. So I'll be grateful if you just put your cameras on, because I can't see anyone. And any questions, so just raise your hand and then you can use your microphone and I'll try and answer questions.
I'll just jump in case Amy isn't on a microphone. She's asked in chat whether she will be able to have the slides afterwards because they're really useful.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, how do you raise hands? I think it's in reactions, isn't it? Yes. If you click on more, it gives you a point which says reactions, and that's where you can raise your hand. So any questions, it could be related to what I've said, you agree or don't agree, or any comment, or if there are any things that you're struggling with in your journey in terms of developing the questions. I think you're interested in that context, that's why you're here. So there must be something that you would like to explore and talk about. Amy, thank you.
Apologies, I've got building work, so hopefully I can get through this without any drills going on. I'm actually just finished my Human Rights Law Masters on autism. So my PhD area that I want to go into is more of a crossover. So it will be more looking at the psychology side and the rights of basically autistic women, basically in upholding their human rights. So I just was keen to know whether or not that would, that sort of crossover of research is a good fit, basically.
Anything which helps you understand a phenomena is useful, and the way things are going more interdisciplinary research where more than one discipline is involved or the concept are involved is useful. And you still have got a focus question, isn't it? Because your population is focused. You're looking at a particular population. You're looking at their experiences. So it's not that your question is not focused. You may have to interpret findings depending on the group that you are to talk about. So for example, you may want to talk to psychologists about the needs of these particular women, or professionals, medics or nurses, or anybody else that needs of these particular women, and you will tweak your messages according to that particular group that you're talking to. And if you were going to talk to the women themselves, you will tweak your messages and change the focus in terms of the findings or the learning that you have for that particular group slightly differently. It's very much similar to what these days, if you write a funding application or something, what you normally do is you're asked to write a scientific abstract, but then you also have to write what do they call it? Non-technical summary. Plain English summary, that's called. And the idea usually is to be able to articulate the same information in a very simple language so other people can understand. So I think it's a very good example of a study, and you've gone through all those processes. But the problem is, with many different disciplines, we think that's not the case. But actually, any research that you do starts off with a specific question that you want to answer. Because even if you look at your question, you're not looking at women generally. You're looking at a very specific subgroup of women, maybe in a very specific setting or a country, maybe in a very specific ethnicity, and you're trying to explore their experiences. So I think it still is relevant, and it still is very focused, and you still are using the same principle. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I'm going to turn my mic back off because of the drilling, and I don't want everyone else to suffer. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. Thank you. Andrea?
I was just going to say I can relate to the struggling to nail down like your research question, because I've got like two quite things that I'm passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
But they're quite broad subjects, so being able to actually nail that down to quite a very specific thing is something that I do find very challenging, and I think I would have to have a lot of conversations with a lot of people to try and get their perspectives as well and their input to try and actually narrow that down and feel like I've not lost my passion for the subject as a whole because I've made it so small, feel so small, if that makes sense.
No, you're not. It's the same thing, like you're in the same trap, which I said earlier on, that people want to change the world. And when I meant when I'm saying this, what I meant is that they want to have a broader question which they think is going to benefit, and they think that if they put it any smaller, any kind of did it in a smaller sort of section, it's going to not to have that particular impact. So if I just go back to Amy's example, I'm sure Amy must have gone through those kind of thinking, okay, only focusing on this particular subgroup of women, does that mean the findings are too specific? Would it be useful to anybody else? Can it be generalized to other people? Would other people be able to learn something? So that happens, and we think that as we focus, we're going to lose the impact, but actually we don't, because the deeper and the focus you have, you've got more time to look at the depth of the issue around it, and usually that relates back to the broader issue that you want to cover anyway. So in that sense, it helps, but then it's also important that you think through how much time you have, how much expertise you have. So for instance, if you were doing, let's say, internship for 6 months time, and you need to develop a discrete project or do something around that in that particular time period, or you're doing audit and you only have about a month or 2 months in your time to complete that, and limited help and support available from other people. So it would help if your question was discrete and small and focused, because then you can interrogate it better. You will know where to collect the data from. You will know who to ask any questions that you have, and to complete that aspect, and then move on to the next aspect of same questions later on through another project. So it's never a wasted effort, but I can completely understand how it can feel daunting, and it can feel difficult. But yes, going through that cycle of developing questions, asking other people, and maybe just sitting down and writing what resources you need, what sort of data collection would it involve, what is it that you want to get out of it, would help you make it even more focused. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think as well, as you just said, like your time and your resources can really dictate what you can and can't do as well. So you need to think through all that very carefully before you jump into something that just ends up being too big to manage, and then it fails for that reason. But yeah, it's still tricky.
Exactly. It is. It's not easy. It takes practice. It takes quite so I sit on quite a lot of funding panels, and one of the things which as a researcher I used to have this think about, that when you're writing for bids, what is a good research topic? What is it something that you need to that will help you get some funding? And what I have learned over time, that it's not a particular specific research topic or issue. It's more of a it's more of how you describe it, how you explain it, what is the significance of the thing that you're trying to explore, and how it is going to change or make an impact. Why is it important to understand? So it could be anything, any small little or any big little thing, but it has to be specific enough to be and for you to be able to articulate why it is important. Roddy, I thought I saw your hand at one point. Do you have any question or comment?
I think he's popped his question into chat.
Yeah, I'm having a look. Okay, so Philip says, Computer needs starting. Okay. I'm looking at least 75 papers of literature review and craft the research question or a thesis. Is there any suggested or standard number of primary research questions and sub-question? Okay, Ronnie, can you explain this? You're looking at least 75 papers for literature review and craft the research question. So are you trying to say that you're trying to specify your research question? There's usually no standard numbers of research questions or primary or sub questions that you need to have. You usually should have a general hunch. Now it depends if you're doing a qualitative study or quantitative study. You usually need to have the broader topic or broader question focused enough, specific enough to be able to start off, and then you develop a review question based on that question earlier on. And the review question generally helps you identify relevant literature related to the aspect that you want to explore. And the 75 studies, you may come back with 75 studies that you come up with, or you may end up with only about 25 or 30 studies. The chances are that if you have got 75 research studies, your question is quite broad and you're looking at too many things. If your question was specific, I think anything between 30 to 40 is usually the number of studies that you get. Would you agree with that, Sarah?
It is quite hard to generalize, to be honest. That would be a manageable number. It's whether it's sufficient, I don't know. I think it will depend on the topic.
Yes. And the other thing is that if there are 75 studies on a particular topic that you identify, you may also want to have a look at how many reviews are conducted on that studies. And you may find there are probably enough reviews that you could look at the reviews of those studies rather than reviewing individual studies and try and come up with an answer there. Now, going back to the same point, why you need to review 75 studies or the reviews of the study is that it helps you understand what is already been done on the topic, what are the gaps in the literature, what is the strength and weaknesses of available evidence, and how can you refine your research question to make it more effective, to make it more doable, and to make it more efficient and useful. And that's why you look at so your review questions that you use for your literature review are different than the research question that you do for your research. But you could use the same principles to be able to develop a good question. Does that help you in some ways? And I'm happy to talk to you if that helps, and have a look at something, if that's useful. Any other questions, any other comments? Is that been useful? Please do give me some feedback. To me, it's very, what I don't know, has that been of any help to all of you? Could it have been different, or do you have any questions, basically?
I found it very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy. Christian, you have been quiet.
I am very quiet sometimes. Yes, it has been very helpful. I was just wondering, you said the literature review question is not the same as the research question.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be a research question to do the literature review, or I'm not sure I understand.
They're usually called review questions, and there are different question development frameworks available. Like, for example, Sarah is going to cover these in a minute. So these are usually PICO, PEO, SPICE, and some of the other one, depending on your discipline and depending on your thing. So what they do is they help you develop a question which is focused enough to understand what evidence is already there. Research questions could be different because in a way you still want to identify something different. You don't want to regurgitate the information that you already have. Review questions help you identify what's already available in the form of literature, what we already know about something. So that's why they are slightly different. But we do use the question development frameworks or the similar principle to help students and novice researchers develop their research question, because it helps them think through things to be able to come up with something. But research questions are generally broad, and they vary or change depending on you're doing a quantitative study, you're looking at, for example, perceptions of people or understanding about an issue, or you're looking at some sort of numbers in terms of how many people, for example, had COVID or what affected that, how has that affected their sleep patterns. So you could do it quantitatively in terms of asking, has it affected or has it not affected? Or you could talk to people and ask about their perceptions and their experiences, which methodology you choose. So your question would become slightly different depending on what is it that you want to do and how you want to articulate it. So that's why these are slightly two different concepts, but certainly help one or the other to develop further. So I hope I haven't confused you.
No, I think I got it now.
Yeah.
I think I understand. All
But
right,
Sarah
thank
will
you.
be able to explain few question development frameworks that can be used.
Sure,
Okay,
I will
thank
do.
you.
I've put a link to our feedback survey in the chat, which is a little bit previous because I haven't finished speaking yet. But if you don't load it up, then you'll forget. So if you could have your questionnaire ready to fill in, we really love your thoughts on this particular webinar, obviously, but it helps us develop the series further. So I'm going to stop talking about feedback and actually tell you something. Bear with me a second, and I will.
Yeah, so please do give us any suggestions of any topics as well that you may find useful. And I will let now Sarah to talk about question development framework. So you and she'll be able to answer question. Apologies, I will have to leave for another meeting. But if you would like to send me an email or ask any questions, I'm more than happy to answer that. I'll pop my email into the chat box so you have it. And I leave you in Sarah's capable hands.
Thank you, Parveen. Thank you very much. So this is just a very short segment at the end, really, just to offer you some options. So whilst I'm screen sharing, I'm not particularly multitasking, keeping an eye on chat and things, but I will come back in about 5 minutes and catch up with what anyone may have written into chat. So question frameworks are multi-purpose, really, but they are the key to framing an answerable question. I know Parveen's sort of discussed some elements that make research unanswerable, but I think a question framework is absolutely key to getting one that you can answer. If you want to look at this in more detail, what I advise is having a little Google, because all universities have information out there on question frameworks. I'll give you a tip for narrowing your search at the end so that you can land on lots of other people's university advice to see if you like one better than your own university. But question frameworks are a standard thing that there's plenty of advice out there on them. Okay. So we just touched on that, actually. So Christian asked the question and Parveen was explaining that there are lots of reasons to do searches, and multiple searches are going to be needed when you're setting your research question, when you're actually carrying out the search during the research. So the initial search is obviously you need to see what else is out there on the topic. It would guide you refining your research question or to discover that actually it's a burning issue for you and someone else has answered it. And then that helps you move on to another angle, another area. So you really need to know what the gaps are in the knowledge base in order to fill them, because your research will ideally add something new to what is already known on a topic rather than replicate someone else's current research. So your initial search might also be really handy to check out what kind of methodologies will work for the type of question that you have in mind. And you can search for similar, if not identical, material to see how they had approached their research. But if you're actually, the literature review is going to be the most substantial thing, or if you're doing a systematic review, the actual provide you with the data, then the research question needs to be formulated in a way that translates easily into a literature search. So searching in the healthcare databases requires you to approach the search in an extremely logical way. And there are lots of different frameworks and models you can use to structure the question, which aids database searching. So we talked PICO, PO, it's I was going to say it's famous. It's not famous, is it? It's just, it's popular, if you like, within the circles that require the use of it. So the standard PICO, patient intervention comparison outcome, has more flexibility than it first appears, because you can kind of smudge the comparison and outcome together and cook up. It's still called PICO, but now it's patient intervention, or possibly phenomenon of interest, and a context. So it bends. These things are meant to be aids. They are not intended as straitjackets. So provided you stick to the idea that these are ways to block out concepts into chunks, and carry out with that principle, what you're actually calling the different concepts is slightly less crucial. And you're obviously going to have to write up your methodology if when carrying out a systematic review. But when you're scoping, if you're just inquiring, then provided you're keeping concepts separate, it's not so important what the label on that concept is. So PICO is useful and more bendable, but there are other more tailored question frameworks for different types of material. So Eclipse, I mean, that's really quite useful for qualitative material. It's helpful. You can find mixed methods material there. And it's really got many aspects. I think it's quite alarming when you see a multi-column sort of table like this and think that you have to put something in every column. And you don't. You can use as many as are useful and appropriate for your question. So this example, does self-monitoring of diabetes result in reduced admissions for older people in the community? I've colour-coded it so that these will squirt into their relevant sections as we go. So you can see I've got a fair kind of spread there of what you would expect. You look to see what's the expectation, what improvement do you want to see? And that's obviously the reduced admissions. And then you just slot everything else in that helps frame the search. You would look for alternative words to each of these when you're developing your actual search strategy, but it can be pretty useful to help you frame your question. You don't have, as I say, you don't have to fill every column. Spice is traditionally used for qualitative material. It allows you to add a setting, but I've also seen the P, I, and the C of PICO converted into PICOS, adding a setting onto that. So you can bend that as well. In this particular example I've given, looking at mortality rates for older people, would they be reduced if the initial examination was carried out by allied health staff in A&E? That you can bend in this way. So you've obviously got your setting there, and I'm just nodding towards the many different ways you would need to search for accident and emergency if you're actually constructing a search strategy. There's plenty of different ways, particularly if you were looking internationally and bearing in mind what different countries call their emergency departments. So it's obvious the population is older people. Your intervention that you're particularly interested in is this initial examination by AHPs, and you've got your lower mortality rates. So there isn't an obvious comparison in the initial question, but I suppose the kind of reading between the lines, if you were absolutely swamped by material and you needed to refine it further, you could include an overt comparison there. So you can use it as it suits. Not every column is essential. No one would expect an 8-column question to have something in every column, I don't think. So Spider is probably one of the bendiest in terms of question frameworks. You can use this for qualitative material, you can use it for mixed methods, and it's very, very helpful to, I'm not going to do the clicky thing and send the different concepts flying in. This is how it would break down. The phenomenon of interest is extremely flexible in its own right, but you're able to add a sample to this and then specify research design if that suits you, and not specify it if it doesn't. If you already know the methodology you're looking for to match it, then do. But if you're curious about what methodology has been used, then you wouldn't put something in the design column. You would just look to see what came up in your search for inspiration. So at the point at which you need to do a search, depending on the topic that you need to search, you would use these in slightly different ways. So if that's whetted your appetite, I do have a Word document with lots of different question frameworks sort of in it, and I'd be happy to send that around later. If Parveen will send me a copy of her slides, I can put that all together for the attendees, and we'll send you that out afterwards. I'm going to stop the share and come back and double check if there's anything. Yeah, Amy said, I like Spider. I like Spider. It's extremely useful and flexible, but allows you for some structure. It's not like you kind of sucking things out the air. You're actually using that for structure. I mentioned to start with that universities have these guidance and the question frameworks. If you wanting to search for other universities' material, you know that you can specify within Google to only look on university sites. Shall I show you? Does that make sense? All right, hang on a sec. It's usually much better to demo than to try and do it through the medium of mime, me waving my hands. It really doesn't help, does it? Okay, with a bit of luck, are you seeing my Google screen? I'm seeing a slight nod from Christian. That's helpful. Okay, so the construct that you need to tell Google where you want to look is site : and all university websites have ac.uk in them. So you're setting the parameters of where you want to look. And then if you want to be very specific, you can search a little bit more loosely, but I'm going to show you a really tight search. So 193 results, different question framework, bits on different university sites, forming answerable research questions using frameworks. They all look fairly handy and they're from all over the country. And you can just go and visit them because they're their websites and they're not that precious. Looks like Exeter is trying to corner the market on that. Okay, so if you want it slightly more loose, obviously you don't tell it exactly to find that phrase, and then you're into the 12,000s territory, so you can see why I did it a bit tight to start with. But there's lots and lots of material out there. Spider features, Exeter again. I think Leeds have got a really good site on this. I think Southampton's got some useful stuff. And my favourite university website of all is Lancaster University. My niece is there and her library material looks excellent because I just checked it out. Okay, I'm rabbiting now. Please will you fill in our survey if you haven't already. We use this feedback to develop future sessions and help it become more and more relevant. I'm really glad that you were able to join us this morning, and we will send you the video link, the Spider, etc. Word document and Parveen's slides once I've collected all of those together. The link's not working. Well, that is pesky. Thank you for trying. Bear with me just a second. I will try and make that work. Right, I will try that again. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. Let's try that version. The link works for me. Okay. So a little variety there. That's it. We've reached 11 o'clock. Please do feel free to contact me with questions, or for Parveen, if her expertise is going to be more useful to you. I know my limits. But if it's librarian stuff you need, contact me. If it's Parveen's professorial excellence, then please do contact her. And we look forward to seeing you on a webinar in the future.